To those who came here the first day, I'm Tzvi Schiller, I'm the chair of this conference. And the announcements are as follows. First of all, welcome to the conference. Today, in this room, there will be the ISRACAS Symposium, which is focusing on medical robotics. There are some other things, I don't remember all of them, medical imaging, etc. Professor Leo Yoskovic will be chairing the entire track. And several announcements for the general attendees. We are planning to have an industrial tour on Thursday, half a day, to a company named Genius. The details are on the website. You have to register at the registration desk. On Friday, we plan a tour of Jerusalem, a touristic tour of Jerusalem. It's an all-day event. It will cost you, you will participate in the cost with 200 shekels. Again, register at the desk. For Genius, you have to register early because they need to check security for all the attendees. And last announcement is we are planning to have a closing session at the end of the day. It should be around 5 o'clock. So when all the sessions are finishing, we will converge here and we will summarize this conference and plan for the future. And the last announcement is if you need any receipt, the receipts are waiting for you at the registration desk. So thank you very much for coming. And now this is a better picture like this. Thank you very much for coming, and I will give the podium to Professor Leo Yoskovic.
So, good morning everybody, Boker Tov. Welcome to everybody, especially our guests from abroad. The session we'll have this morning, we will start with two keynote speakers. I'm very glad and proud to introduce Bjoern Juretzki, who comes from the policy officer at the Robotics Unit of the European Commission. He's been managing projects in the area of industrial robotics and is in charge of the public-private partnership in robotics. So, without any further ado,
good morning, everybody. So I will talk about the European research strategy for robotics. And in addition, this is apparently a free eye test because some of the things are not very clear. So if you can read the numbers, this replaces basically your annual visit to your ophthalmologist. So, European research strategy for robotics. I think when I really believe in this, that we have to overcome the technical that we have to basically overcome the technocentric view that we normally have. And we have to embed what we do in the wider social and political context. Because if you speak to political decision makers, those actually that determine how much money we have available, they are not interested in cognitive architectures or dexterous manipulation. You get their attention when you discuss issues that are actually relevant to them, which is unemployment at the moment, competitiveness, productivity, and so on. And I think this is what we have to do much more also in these kind of conferences. So I will first very briefly embed the discussion in the general economic and political background, and I will also present the social background, so to speak, so what people actually think about robots, and then I will try to make the connection and talk about jobs, growth, and robotics, and then what our conclusion from these discussions is, the European answer. This is the European public-private partnership in robotics, and also our new direction in the research strategy. So, this is just to show you where we are at the moment after the financial crisis, GDP trends. And as you can see right now, here in 2013, we're still way below actually the climates in 2007. So we're still recovering. We're still lagging behind actually. So there's still quite a bit of work to do, I think. And this is even more shocking. This is the number of people employed. So we had a high point here in 2008, almost 230 million people employed. And now we're down to 23 million, so 7 million people less. And it doesn't look that these numbers are improving a lot. So again, this is something we have to take into account, I think. And this is probably the most disturbing table. This is the number of unemployed in the EU. This doesn't include Israel, but probably the situation here is not that dissimilar, I guess. And if you just look at this youth unemployment, there are only two countries in the EU at the moment, Germany here and Austria here, which have a youth unemployment below 10%. And some of these numbers are just shockingly high. I mean, in Spain, it's 55% of the youth are unemployed. So this is really something we have to think about when we think about what we do in robotics. Because as you will see, there are actually a lot of attitudes of people saying, okay, robots steal jobs, robots destroy jobs, and this is something we have to work with. And we cannot really disconnect ourselves, I think, from these discussions. Because otherwise, one point, our political decision makers will say, listen, guys, I mean, with this unemployment, we can't fund a technology that actually destroys jobs. So I think we have to make the case for robotics much stronger. Competitiveness is key, of course. As you know, only competitive countries really produce jobs. And the table before is actually the way reflected here, because the European countries that are in the top 10, they also have more acceptable unemployment levels, like Germany, Sweden, Finland, and so on. And I mean, Greece is not very competitive, and as a result, it also has a very high unemployment. It's basically the same way, it's expressed differently. Oh, still not perfect, like this. All right. So this just shows the different productivity levels in the EU, and they differ a lot. I mean, the lowest here is Latvia, where you have a productivity level of roughly like 14 euros per hour, and in Germany that reaches almost 44 euros. So there's a huge gap, and there's a lot of things to do to just close this productivity gap. And as we all know, robots are of course a big force in this. They help to make our industries more productive, so this is actually one solution we have to offer, but I think we have to make the case more clearly. Can I get rid of this thing here? No? I can't. Ah, that's good. Okay, so what are the preliminary conclusions from this first section? I think jobs and growth trump all topics at the time. This is the key challenge of our time, and this is also reflected in this quote from the President of the European Commission, Barroso, who said that ultimately this is about one thing, it's about growth. And this is necessary to remedy actually the most pressing problem, which is unemployment. So this is really everything that our political decision makers are concerned about, and we have to deliver arguments or provide them with arguments why robotics is actually a solution to that. And it's not enough just to say it's a great technology, it's about cognitive architectures or text force manipulation. They're simply not interested in that, and they don't listen to this argument. I've also tried to show that competitiveness is actually key for growth and consequently for jobs. And after the financial crisis, there's actually much stronger focus on manufacturing because this is seen as more sustainable. And there, Germany is quite often the model because it has a lower unemployment and it hasn't really abandoned its manufacturing base. So again, and this is something, of course, where robotics are very strong to keep manufacturing even in high-wage economies. This is one of the big advantages. So now I want to talk a bit about the societal attitudes towards robotics. So we conducted a very big survey, a so-called Eurobarometer survey, in all 27 at that time EU member states. Israel was not covered. So this is representative for all 27 member states with more than 26,000 respondents. And the fieldwork took place last year, between February and March. Can you see that actually? Yes. So this is actually a good result, I think. So if you ask people, okay, what are your views on robots? A large majority actually has a very positive view on robots, or positive. So 56% said it's fairly positive, and another 40% said it's positive. So that's, I think, a good result to work with. But this is kind of abstract. This is also interesting, so we also ask people if they've ever used a robot. And I mean, I don't want to judge that, but 12% said, yes, I've used a robot at home and it worked. I don't know if that's high or low. I think it's actually kind of high if 12% say they've used a robot. It's up to you to decide. This is a bit more pressing. We also asked people whether they think that robots steal jobs. And the darker the color here, the more people agree with that statement. And overall, it was like 70% of people say robots steal jobs. So 2/3 of people. And interesting as well that this opinion, as some were expected, is least widespread in Scandinavia and Eastern Europe, and more widespread in Southeast Europe, actually. So even in countries that are the least competitive, that have the highest unemployment, such as Greece, Portugal, and Spain, also have the highest agreement with the statement. And I wonder what kind of correlation there is between the two things. It's kind of interesting. But this is really something we have to work on. We cannot ignore these kind of things. At one point, people will simply say, okay, we cannot really continue investing in a technology of which we think that it destroys jobs, especially in a time when there is so much unemployment. So we have to take these arguments into account. At the same time, it's a bit contradictory what people say, to be honest. 9 out of 10 respondents said that robots are necessary because they can do jobs that are too hard or too dangerous for people. And I mean, we all know that this is the main driver of robotics, these 3Ds, dull, dangerous, and dirty. These are the jobs that robots can do. And again, we have the highest agreement in Scandinavia and also Germany, and the lowest agreement, again, in the periphery, like Greece, Italy, and Portugal. It would be interesting to do this study in Israel. I wonder if there's also on the periphery or is different opinions on this. We also had some more specific questions. So if people are comfortable actually working or having a robot assisting them at work, and there we had 50% of people being comfortable doing this. So, I mean, my impression is that when you ask people very in an abstract way whether they, like robots or whether they think they steal jobs, then they're actually a bit afraid. But the more concrete it gets, the more open they are. This is also interesting. So we asked them what the priority areas should be for robotics, and on the other hand, what are the areas where robots should be banned. Space exploration comes first, but manufacturing is also very high up there. So 46% of people in total actually think that manufacturing should be an area where robots should be used. Interestingly, I think military and security was also quite high up, because I would have expected that there is more resistance to that, especially in some European countries, but it's not seen as a big problem. On the other hand, we have agriculture here, which is kind of low, so only 11% said that this should be a priority area. And similarly, healthcare, where people are really afraid that this is something they don't like. Of course, we know that these are two big areas where we see robots in the future, healthcare and agriculture. So this is again something we have to take into account and address somehow. So the preliminary conclusions from this section is that robots are still seen as job killers. This is still very widespread. There are many misconceptions about robots in general. But again, I think this is my impression that there's still people who are not in touch with robots, so it's like an abstract fear. There's little first-hand knowledge of robots, and this perception is mainly driven by second-hand reports, media reports, or movies from Hollywood. And once people get in touch with robots, their attitudes actually change, get much more positive. I mean, we did a more in-depth analysis, and we looked just what the people who actually have worked with robots already think, and they have a much more positive opinion overall. So I think this is also one conclusion, that you have to bring the robot out there and let people engage with it somehow, and then opinions change. So now this is basically the most important section: jobs, growth, and robotics. I mean, we all know, of course, that robots have a positive contribution to make to economy and to individual businesses. But is this opinion shared? As we've seen already in the wider public, it's a bit ambiguous. So, some people think, yeah, it's okay, but they also think that robots steal jobs. But the expert opinion is a bit different. So these are some quotes from some leading economists, for example, and I don't want to read them out, but you can just choose one and see what it says. Some are kind of shocking. I mean, this guy down here says that in the next decade, 50% of the jobs in the US economy will be eliminated by robots. And this in a climate where everybody's already afraid about unemployment and so on. So, I mean, my impression is that public opinion in general is still a bit liquid, but expert opinion is really, and I mean expert opinion of people who don't really work with robots, so these kind of economists, but expert opinion is really solidifying. I mean, I've seen so many media reports in the past couple of months about people being, afraid of this technology and automation in general. And this is something we have to engage in, as I said before. It's really not enough just to talk about the technology, but we also have to, think about the economics of robotics, the ethical, legal issues, and so on, and engage these people actually in discussion. It would be good actually to have at these kind of conferences a track, for example, on the economics of robotics. I mean, this should be one of them. So while people are actually afraid of robots, and some experts have very negative views, we actually have some very good results and some very hard evidence that robots have a positive contribution to make. So I have a couple of slides now. This shows a relation between the US employment rate and productivity change by decade. I mean, the picture is not very clear. So you had a very high productivity increase in the 50s, but not so high employment increase. On the other hand, in the 2000s, this large productivity increase, but hardly any employment increase. So looking at this, there doesn't seem to be a clear picture between productivity on the one hand, which is largely driven by robotics, I'll come to that later, and employment on the other. But if we look at unemployment, it's a much clearer picture. So here it seems that The higher the productivity increase, the lower the average unemployment. If you just look at the 50s, for example, and then productivity increase is declining, while the average unemployment is actually increasing. And the same in the 90s. So productivity is increasing again from the 90s to the 2000s, and then unemployment is going down a tiny bit. So there seems to be actually an inverse relationship here. So the better, the more productivity you have, the less unemployment as well. And these are the numbers we have to push somehow. We have to make people aware that there's actually this positive relationship. But this is still a bit abstract because it's just about productivity. We can even get more concrete. There's an interesting study done by the Copenhagen Business School, which compared different sectors in different countries and then made a statement what the productivity change would be if automation in each country would be at the level as the most automated country. And it looks like a bit complex here, but it basically says if you look here at Germany and transport, which are cars. So Germany is the most productive economy in terms of producing cars. And if the UK had the same level of automation as Germany, productivity would increase by 76%. I mean, these numbers look very high to me as well. And the study looks also very mathematical to me, but it's nonetheless interesting. I think it's an indication at least. Of course, we know productivity doesn't mean jobs, so they also looked into a long-term employment change. And it's still, if you look at this example again, Germany, UK, if UK had the same level of automation, in the long term could increase its employment in this sector by one quarter. So this is a very positive message. This is what we have to tell people actually. You have to invest in robotics because you actually reduce unemployment over time. Which also he said that in the short term, actually, the study found that unemployment increases because, of course, when you create different jobs with robotics. This is also, I think, the truth has to be told as well. We have more studies, of course. There's one interesting study done by the International Federation of Robotics, which states that in total, 8 to 10 million jobs are created as a result of robotics. And 300,000 of those are directly in the robotics industry, producers, service providers, and so on. But it also takes into account all the sectors where robots will make a difference because they make manufacturing more productive. And we all know, or we feel at least, that many manufacturing plants in high-wage countries such as France, UK, or Germany are only kept there because you have such high levels of automation, which even out somehow the wage differences to countries like China or India. Again, this is also an interesting study. Unfortunately, you cannot see it all. It's down here. So this is a McKinsey study looking at the 12 disruptive technologies. And I mean, the numbers are really mind-boggling they came up with. So they found that advanced robotics could generate an additional impact or economic impact in the order of $1.7 trillion to $4.5 trillion each year by 2005. And these are the numbers that our political masses want to hear. They want to see, what about the growth opportunities here. And while these numbers look big, actually a lot of the assumptions make somehow sense. I mean, for example, here for human augmentation, they say, okay, there are 50 million amputees, and if we only equip 5 to 10% of the amputees with advanced robotics, this would generate about $240,000 per person for improved life. So the assumptions somehow make sense, and then you can afford with these gigantic numbers, which look somehow unbelievable, but well, there is some truth behind it. And of course, there are also the contribution to societal challenges. We discussed that already in between the sessions. Just a couple of facts. I mean, I heard from German car manufacturers that the average age of workers in some plants increases each year by 1 year. I mean, this is a huge challenge, and also for productivity, of course. At the same time, no one wants to be a farmer anymore. It's a very tiring and tedious job to get up every morning, for example, and take care of your cows or other animals. So again, this is a huge challenge for us, I think, to be addressed. And this is already happening. So you have now robots in gearboxes, for example. This is a KUKA robot at the Daimler plant. And this is a very delicate job because the robot here has to insert a part into another part and then jiggle it somehow and then put it in. And that was before a task only a human worker could do. And it was very tiring because you had to carry kind of a heavy weight in a very uncomfortable position for quite some time. But now you have a robot to do it. So these are the kind of solutions we provide as well. And another example are the milk robots. I don't know if you've seen these wonders of technology. And this is also actually European leadership par excellence, because there are basically two companies, Lely from the Netherlands and De Laval from in Sweden, and they dominate 95% of the market. It might seem like a boring product, but it's hundreds of billions of euros turnover. This is a huge growth opportunity, actually. And it creates a lot of advantages for the farmer. I mean, Lely says in their marketing brochures, I don't know if it's true, that the average farmer saves 600 hours of work per year. So that's almost 2 hours per day, which the farmer can spend in different manners. So again, I think there is a clear link between societal challenges, demographic change on the one hand, and productivity on the other. And of course, another societal challenge is that robots help to make the production greener and less wasteful, because they're more precise and they produce less waste, actually. In general, robotics in itself is also, of course, a strong driver of growth. So there are some predictions that the world robotics market could grow from currently 25 billion to 60 billion in 2020. So this is one of the biggest growth that's out there, basically, and then it's really substantial industry. And this growth is particularly strong in service robotics, where the annual growth expectations range from 15 to 25%. So these are huge opportunities. And if we get this message to our political decision makers, they get interested. And there are even more growth opportunities further down the line. And I saw some predictions which say that by 2050, around 40% of all flights, so this means commercial flights, monitoring flights, but also personal flights, could be done by unmanned systems. Just think about these numbers, 40% of all flights. I mean, it's big. And just going back to the milking robots, so at the moment only 5% of all European cows are milked by a robot. So I mean, there's still a lot of market to be developed there. And this is probably true for other areas of agriculture as well. So this just links to the study, because I think the presentation will be made available to you, so you can easily then access these studies. So from this section, my preliminary conclusions are that actually productivity increases do lead to an increase in growth. This is already one big conclusion, because a lot of economists even say, no, that's not true, not at the moment anymore. Actually, they think that robots and automation decreases employment. And we have to tell them that's not the case. We have actually evidence that the opposite is happening. And robots, of course, make a direct and big contribution to productivity. We've also seen that societal challenges and productivity are closely linked. And in general, that there are huge growth opportunities in service robotics, in agriculture, also still in industrial assembly, actually. And finally, robotics in itself is actually a very successful industry and a big driver of growth and employment. So, what do we make of this picture? These are some preliminary observations, basically summarizing the previous slides. So there's really overwhelming political pressure to focus on jobs, growth, and competitiveness. So we have to frame really what we do in this context. At the same time, there's a lot of societal skepticism about robotics, but once people actually have worked with the systems, this skepticism to some extent at least disappears. And contrary to what many people think, robots are not job killers. The opposite is true. They're actually a big job creation machine. These are the kind of messages we have to convey. And our conclusion from this is that, first of all, we have to give a much stronger emphasis also on the softer aspects of robotics. So the ethical, legal, societal issues, but also, importantly, the economic issues. We really have to make the case for robots, the economic case, and the business case. We also have to really improve outreach to general public, and I think this event was a good opportunity, and I saw that actually lots of school classes were here and listening into the presentations. This is exactly what we have to do. We have to engage young people and show them what this technology is about. And I think we also have to put a much stronger focus on innovation to generate this higher competitiveness, in particular manufacturing. I saw that I mentioned already yesterday in my presentation about the funding opportunities, and I will repeat it in a second. That in our work program we actually give now a much stronger focus on innovation. And we also have to bring robots from the lab into the field. It's not enough anymore to develop something in the field and then hope it will be discovered. But we really have to actively reach out to the general public and potential users. So just speaking about this outreach to the general public. So we have one main vehicle for this outreach, is the European Robotics Unit. It's a decentralized event all over Europe. And this is particularly aimed at children and young adults. And it's basically that labs, universities, and companies exhibit their research projects or interesting products and then invite the public to come in. And we have actually tens of thousands of visitors each year across Europe. I don't know if Israel participates in this already, I don't think so. We also generate quite a bit of media coverage. And the next edition is taking place at the end of November until the 1st of December. And we already have now more than 250 events across Europe, and we expect again tens of thousands of visitors. So this is one thing we do in general public. Of course, this is one picture actually we had last year from one of the events. I think it was at IIT in Italy. You can just see, I think this is always fascinating. Little kids, I mean, they're so fascinated by this technology. And it doesn't take much to really fascinate them. You just have to show them basically, and they really get it. So I think this is really important that we take this aspect very seriously and reach out to the general public. We also have other events, such as the London Science Museum or the Atelier Arts et Sciences in Paris. And we also always ask now our projects to actually have a credible communication plan. So it's not enough anymore just to have a website which is updated once per year, but you have to do a bit more. You really have to actively try to reach the public. As I said, we also have a stronger focus on these softer aspects of robotics. So we launch studies in this area. At the moment, we actually have launched a study which looks at individual companies and what effects robots have on these individual companies. So we hope to release the results early next year. We also conduct these public opinion surveys, like the Eurobarometer survey. We'll probably do another one next year. We also launched a little work program to look at the legal consequences of autonomous systems in general. I mean, it makes it obvious, of course, if you think of liability in the medical context or data privacy. So these are also topics that actually could potentially become obstacles for growth, and we have to address them now. We're also creating a small network of interested legal and ethics scholars in this area. And if you know anybody in Israel who might want to participate with that, just let me know and we'll bring you in touch with these people. We also organize workshops at conferences on these topics. And we also have some coordination action which deals with these areas. And also in this public-private partnership, we have some activities. I think this is also an important message. Just investing in R&D in itself is also important to drive growth. And this chart is pretty clear. You have average R&D investments down here, and this is GDP growth. And it's a nice curve actually. It's pretty obvious that the more you invest in R&D, the higher growth opportunities you have. So this is again something we have to show to our political decision makers and tell them, listen, you have to invest in this in order to exit from the economic crisis. And I mean, I presented yesterday the framework of Horizon 2020, and there we actually managed to increase the total budget from 50 billion euros to 70 billion euros, despite the financial crisis. Because I think our political decision makers actually get the message now. They understand that you have to invest in research, even in tough financial times. But we have to continue pressing this message and making people aware of it. As I said, we also have a much stronger focus on innovation in our work program. So if you just look at this first quote, which very clearly says that the priority is given actually to projects which are driven by industrial or market needs. We also make use of new instruments such as this pre-commercial procurement, which I think is coming from the US, and they use it very successfully in the military context. Pre-commercial procurement is when the user is actually in the driving seat. So the user defines a certain goal and then procures RTD services to reach this goal. So it's unlike other research projects where researchers are actually the ones making the shots. We also, for the first time, prioritize market domains in our calls. So it's not just very general research, but you have to research robotics technologies within a certain market domain. In the first call, for example, this will be manufacturing and agriculture. And the second is healthcare, transport, and consumer. We also introduced the concept of technology readiness levels to our work programs, and this is again a term that's more used in the innovation side of things. So we expect actually proposals to increase TRLs in their research. And finally, and maybe most importantly, we actually also expect over the long term that all projects make a positive contribution towards growing market shares of European robotics manufacturers. We simply can't ignore the economic reality anymore. We have to really make the research work for our companies as well. This doesn't mean that basic research is not possible anymore, but at least you have to think of the bigger frame, and you cannot ignore that anymore. And this is what we're currently doing. This is this so-called public-private partnership in robotics, and there the general idea is that we develop a work program together with the community, so that we fund really research that matters to the community. And how it works is that we actually translate the priorities of industry and academia into our work programs and profit proposals. because we believe that we can only make innovation happen in cooperation with industry. And we have to simply understand better what their needs are and requirements are to address them. And again, this doesn't mean that basic research is not possible. I mean, industry, at least the ones I talk to, are acutely aware that they also have to do basic research and very far-reaching research efforts. So it's not that it's just applied stuff, which is probably less interesting. But we also believe that academia alone simply cannot succeed in making innovation happen. So this is the general idea of the PPP, and how it works in detail is that the community develops a so-called strategic research agenda. So this is the key document. This is a document written by the community, and it defines the research priorities, technologies to be developed, and sectors to be incorporated. And our first call, what I just mentioned, that we prioritize certain market domains, is actually an outcome of this exercise. So the community told us, okay, we want to focus on agriculture manufacturing in the first call, and this is what we're doing. And we will use this SRA as a basis to develop actually our work programs and our proposals. The draft started last year in September, but you don't have to fear that you're missing out, because it will be updated annually. Of course, wide participation is essential. We want all views to be incorporated, so I can only encourage you to join this initiative. I should also say that participation in our calls does not depend on participating in this exercise. So you can still submit proposals without being part of this PPP robotics. I think this is also important to point out. Within this PPP, we also try to more outreach to new sectors and end users, because as we've seen, the big growth opportunities are actually outside classical industrial robots, and also the expected productivity gains are actually outside industrial areas which already use industrial robots. So, I mean, some of the areas are listed here: healthcare, agriculture, mining exploration, consumer inspection monitoring. So we're trying to reach users there, but also providers who can actually make a positive contribution to robotics. And we have some first successes already in agriculture and in healthcare. In agriculture, we actually have a very good coverage of interesting companies, and they also understand the need to reach out to the robotics community actually. But of course, more needs to be done. So these are just some nitty-gritty details of the PPP, just in case you're interested. So the private side of the PPP is organized, so the public side is us, the European Commission, and the private side of the PPP is organized in the organization under Belgian law, the so-called Robotics ASBL. And they have a president, vice president, and a board of directors. Of course, nothing in life comes for free, so membership costs a bit of money depending on your turnover or your research budget, but it's actually kind of modest. The governance structure of this Robotics ASBL looks like this. So on the left-hand side, you have all the industrial players. You probably know a couple of the names here: KUKA, ABB, or Aldebaran, but we also have some other new players such as Klaas from agriculture, but also big companies such as Siemens, and interestingly also very different companies, like on the left-hand here, Robotics Unit, which is a venture capital fund from France. On the right-hand side, we have all the academic players, which are currently represented in the board of directors. And again, you probably recognize a couple of names there: AIT from Germany, Carlo from Belgium, and so on. And us, the European Commission, we basically interact in a very structured way with this board of directors. So they tell us about research priorities and so on, and we then take that into account. And this is not just a talking shop. This is a bit more. So we will actually sign a contractual arrangement for this PPP, where we will define key performance indicators, objectives, commitments, and so on, and also what happens if it doesn't deliver. So I think we're very clear in our minds what we want to do, and if it doesn't deliver that, then we also have the freedom to say, okay, we try something new. But I think this is actually important, that it's more than a talking shop. We will have actually something written down and something very concrete and substantial there. Let's skip this. So what would be the benefits of being a member? I think the most important benefit is actually that it would enable you to inform us about your research needs and to shape the R&D and R agenda of what we do. And we actually invest a substantial amount of money. So probably in Horizon 2020, roughly 700 to 800 million euros. So if you want to influence how we spend that money, it would be important for you to contribute to that. Secondly, I think it's also a great network opportunity. I already noticed some very interesting, new collaborations between researchers and companies, which never thought that they would collaborate with each other, especially from these new sectors. I mean, there might be companies out there within agriculture or healthcare, of which you're not aware, but through this PPP you can get in touch with them and actually build a nice little research project. It also helps you to become visible as a member of the European robotics community, and you also contribute to, of course, creating like a strong European community and a strong European ecosystem. Also, you are being represented at high political levels, so we have the buy-in and commitment of our political decision makers, and we also help you a bit with business development and market intelligence. So the current status of this PPP is that this number is not updated. We have actually now more than 145 companies, universities, research organizations, end users, but also trade fair organizers and venture capitalists in this robotics ASBL. New sectors are also represented, and the PPP application has been submitted and is currently being assessed. And a memorandum of understanding has already been signed last year, just showing that this process is already going on for some time. And these are the signatories. In case you don't know them, so this is our commissioner, Henry Cruz from the Netherlands. This is Herman Goyens, the Vice President for Academia, and this is the CTO of Libat, who's also the President of the Robotics ASBL. This is what I mean when I said being represented at high political levels. So we really have the support of our highest political decision maker, and she is also very engaged and committed to this kind of work. So my conclusion. There are actually huge challenges ahead. So we've seen the employment situation, we've looked at competitiveness, there is offshore manufacturing and so on. But there are also huge growth opportunities ahead. We've talked about service robotics and huge growth is expected there. We've seen all the new sectors. We've seen also what positive contribution robotics can make to actually increase productivity and then consequently as well employment. And for us, is PPP robotics actually the vehicle of choice to address these challenges and also to seize the rising opportunities. So first of all, it offers us to streamline outreach and communication activities. So now we finally have this one-stop shop where journalists can go and get information. It's also much easier to organize just events through this vehicle. It's also a very good vehicle to investigate the softer aspects of robotics. And finally, and most importantly, I think, the PPP allows us to really increase the innovation capability of European robotics manufacturers and end users, and as well academia. And this is what it's all about in the end. So we hope to increase competitiveness through more innovation, and this is actually the raison d'etre of this PPP robotics, to make Europe more competitive and innovative. Thank you very much.
For your presentation. If there's a brief question from the public. Yes, please.
According to my experience, he said the robotics was extremely competitive. Results were like 5 to 7% success rate. Do you foresee a change in this direction, because it's very frustrating industry and academic?
Yes, I mean, we hope we can actually address that also through this PPP in robotics, as I've said. So we prioritize different market domains and the different goals, and we hope that this will actually reduce oversubscription. So when you see that your topic, for example, healthcare, is not addressed in call 1 but in call 2, then you will not actually submit a proposal in call 1. And thus we hope that the overall number of proposals per call goes down and the success rate goes up. That's actually at least our hope, and this is actually one of the motivations why we put this structure in place as well. But at least that's our idea. I mean, let's see if it works in reality, but we are acutely aware of that problem and we hope that we can actually address it.
Another trend that I saw was that most of the winners were from academia in the FP7 robotic theme. When you say that you'll have more emphasis on innovation, does that mean that you will have more, that you'll be looking at more close to market projects, and eventually, hopefully, more industry players will hopefully win these kinds of bids?
Yes, we hope that, but basic research will still be possible, but you always have to think at least about the market domain. And I'm pretty sure that many proposals will feature a company, but that's not a must. But I mean, we hope that that will happen as well. Yes, that it will, less just pure academic projects actually is not what we want anymore. We want at least to have, even in the basic research part, some kind of a market orientation in the broader sense.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's thank.
Sorry. Just if you can make clear exactly how much budget is available for the next 2 years for robotics, and
Yes.
3 words about the main domains, because I think some of the people were not here yesterday.
Yes.
Exactly how much budget were we looking, and is available for the Israeli budget as well.
Yes, so we have 2 calls in the first work group 2014-2015. And call 1 will open in December and close in April, and the budget for this call, I think, will be like 80 million or something like that. And we'll have 3 different target outcomes in this first call. The first one is just RTD for industrial and service robotics, I think 57 million. And within that, we have a very broad set of technologies and abilities that we want to advance. And this is, for example, more autonomous systems, and technologies are cognition and so on. So this is very broad in general. But it then gets more specific through the market domains. And in the first call, the market domains, as far as I remember, are manufacturing, agriculture, and commercial and civil. Civil is basically all public sector users, law enforcement and so on, fire services. And commercial is all the rest, it's mining, exploration, and so on. And this is one target outcome. The second target outcome is robotics use cases, which we have already used in the past. And that's 12 million euros. And in these use cases, we actually have a focus on the operational deployment of robots. So it's not so much about research, but really deploying robots. And the third target outcome is pre-commercial procurement in the area of public safety. So this is, again, as I said, where the user is in the driving seat. So we expect, for example, law enforcement agencies building a consortium and then developing an idea how robots can help them into work. And there we have 5 million euros. And in the second call, just very briefly, it's a very similar structure. So we also do basic RTD for industrial and service robots for the domains of healthcare, transport, and consumer. We also have the use cases, and we also have this pre-commercial procurement, but then for healthcare. But I think there's still enough time, and you will probably get information about this call too in your course as well.
Thank you very much.
Just one announcement. Anybody who wants to talk to Bjoern, you can actually, he's going to be available here. You can talk to him in the lobby, you can sit someplace outside of the exhibition. So you'll be here all day, just take advantage of it.
Thank you very much.